Blue Raven, Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
Ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
downloaded to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
and I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Okay, it's 4 o'clock in the UK, just gone 4 o'clock. It's 11 a.m. in the States. It's the 8th of August, I think, 2020. I tried to get Skype to work on my laptop, but it doesn't want to play ball. So I'm on the mobile, which means this might be slightly a different format to the usual format because I'm holding a laptop on my lap and holding a phone in my hand, and I'm going to be doing my best to just talk for an hour, I think. I'll play a couple of videos. I was going to rant about viruses and the effects of viruses and whether viruses exist and whether the science backs up whether viruses cause disease. But I may not do that. I might just play a couple of videos instead. I'm logged into the chat room at freedomslips.com. So if anybody's actually listening, can you just let me know whether you can hear me and how good the sound is or how bad the sound is, just so that I can get an idea of what needs to happen. And probably put the phone down and mess about with the laptop if I need to, but just as we go along. So I'll just make this up as I go along. And what I've been doing this week is letting go of resistance yet again, letting go of resistance to the world as it is. So acceptance of the world as it is another way of saying that. I might not like it particularly, but I have to accept it. Once I've accepted it, then I can use my imagination to change it. This is my theory. This is the theory that I've been working on for the last year or so, and it seems to work. So the assumption is that imagination creates reality. So what I'm kind of looking for at the moment is, where is the imagination? So in terms of COVID-19 or coronavirus or whatever you want to call it, SARS-CoV-2, where is the imagination? And it looks to me like the imagination was in the preparation, the Event 201 simulation that happened just over a year ago seems to be the place. If the assumption that imagination creates reality is accurate, then everything will have a place where the imagination is. It might not be visible, but there'll be a place. If there's high visibility for these things, high visibility events probably, I'm guessing, have high visibility imaginative causes. That's certainly the case I'm suggesting for the epidemic we're going through at the moment, the alleged epidemic. I'm not going to commit myself to either side because I do think there's something there. I just don't know what it is. I haven't worked out the details of it yet. But the Event 201 potentially could have been the imaginative cause if what I'm suggesting is accurate. There was a simulation going on. There was a drill going on for the 7/7 bombings that happened in London a few years ago. I heard a report on Radio 4 on that morning of a simulation of a bomb attack. And there must have been preparation for the simulation, so that would be the imaginative cause of the bombing there. 9/11, there was a simulation going on of an air attack on the west coast, on the east coast of the States, on the same day with almost exactly the same scenario as the 9/11 attack. So prior to that was the Project for the New American Century documents, and then all the preparation for the simulation would be the imagination that produces the actual attack. So I'm not suggesting that the imagination is conscious. It could be subconscious. It could just be a process that's happening, that when people prepare for something, it produces the thing that they're preparing for. If you're frightened of something, you get the thing that you're frightened of. That seems to be the way it's been working in my life. On a personal level, and from what I see in the world, that seems to be the way the world works, or part of the way the world works, from my perspective. Other people see the world in different ways, but that's how I've come to see the world after 54 years. And what I'm doing now is using imagination to consciously create a different world. For me, as an individual, and with a bit of luck for the people around me as well. I do this with Ho'oponopono as a prayer at the soup kitchen sometimes. I do it at work when I'm talking to people that I work with, and on the telephone sometimes you can do a little bit of something. It's not easy to do, but you can do a little bit of something when you're talking to people. You can hear when people are depressed or when people are anxious. And just trying, there are little things you can do with your voice and your manner that can I've only got 30 seconds, admittedly, but you can relax people a little bit and take them to a slightly different place. My job is telesales, so my job is to take people from one place where they're not all that interested in having a quote for home improvements to a place where they might say yes to an appointment for somebody to go out and see them. So I'm used to doing that in quite a short space of time. And you can do the same thing with people's state of anxiety or fear. If I can hear something in the background when they're speaking, if I've got enough time, if I've actually got a conversation going, I can reduce the level of anxiety and move people through it a little bit. It's not part of my job, but I'll do it anyway. I do it with imagination. I send out love, whatever love is. Love plus imagination seems to be a key thing. Love and I'd say love, acceptance plus imagination is a way to help people to move through stuff. So that's where I'm at the moment, at work and in the world generally. So if we look at it from Heidegger's point of view, he uses the phrase being in the world. So I am the being and the world is the world, but I'm not separate from the world. because the world is being as well. And if imagination creates reality, then the world is my being. So not only am I the world is my being, which means that I can change it. I can use my sense of where I am in consciousness, my sense of my state of being, to influence the world around me. And it's an interesting idea. I find the whole New Thought movement very, very interesting, because they've managed to combine a lot of philosophical ideas that aren't really spoken about into practical, day-to-day helping people with words and formulas and treatments. So it's a very practical way of approaching philosophy. And I like the practical. I go to philosophy groups that are very conceptual sometimes, very conceptual most of the time, and they put a lot of effort into keeping things conceptual in those groups. And I tend to bring it down to real world examples, because if the philosophy is not giving you something in the world that you see, in the world that you live in, then for me, it's probably not a philosophy I want to be involved in. There has to be some kind of practical aspect to it. If I exist in the world, then my philosophy has to be something that can exist in the world, or can recreate the world, or can improve the balance of one thing with another. I tend to think of the whole process as an editing process. So everything exists, every variation of every possibility exists somewhere. And my thoughts are the editing process, is the way that I look at it. So it may or may not be the way that things are, but that seems to be a good analogy for me at the moment. And I've been doing it that way for about a year, maybe a year and a half, a couple of years. So using various techniques, but it definitely helps to edit out issues that I can't deal with at the moment. And it definitely helps to edit in things that improve my life. So I might have to go back to the things that I've edited out at some point, but I can't do everything all at once. I can only do really one, maybe a couple of things at a time. So I've got to a place where I'm living in a good apartment. The neighbours are a bit dodgy, admittedly, which I didn't factor in to the visualization and the creative process when I manifested this apartment. The next one, if I ever move, I'll remember to factor in neighbours that aren't psychotic, and neighbours that don't do karaoke till 2 o'clock in the morning. But for this one, I didn't do that because I didn't realize it was going to be necessary. So I've been kind of ruminating on what it is about my psychology that's produced the situation over the last week. That's one of the questions that came up last week in the radio show. And there's something about me that's produced a situation where I've got a Chinese karaoke downstairs and psychotic neighbours, or neighbours that shout psychotically at each other. So what that does, though, it brings up my resentments from the past and my anger from the past. Because if I start to overreact, it pulls up memories, and then I can clear the memories. So in actual fact, the Chinese karaoke is part of my healing process. It's pulling up memories that I wouldn't be able to access otherwise. So it makes sense for me to think of it like that. Everything becomes part of my process ultimately. Every interaction becomes part of a healing process that's moving me to a place that I'm either needing to get to or needing to acknowledge exists. I don't think there's a huge movement's a tricky thing, because movement forward suggests that there's some kind of lack in where I am presently, which I'm not necessarily saying. It may be just being a different state of being, a different state of consciousness is the thing that I'm trying to get to, or thing that I'm trying to acknowledge in myself. That's a better way of phrasing it. So if I'm aiming to get to a place in consciousness that has less resentment and less anger, that place doesn't allow the Chinese karaoke to happen, and doesn't allow the psychotic arguing next door to happen, because it's a place that doesn't hold any resentment for anybody in the world, really. That's the place I'm aiming to acknowledge in myself. And once I get to that place, the Chinese karaoke has to stop. And the psychotic neighbors seem to have stopped for a couple of days. But one potential scenario is that they got so loud and aggressive with each other that they've moved to a different place temporarily, or one of them's been sectioned, or they've just moved back to parents, or moved in with somebody else, or whatever, or they're in a mental institution. I don't know what the situation is. I'm speculating, but I've been quiet for a couple of days, and the Chinese karaoke's calmed down a little bit. So my work on my state of being seems to be doing the job, even though it takes a little bit of an upsurge to get that happening. So if I just accept the way things are and then change my state of being, the way things are will change. That's kind of the theory of what I'm getting at. I know I kind of express this every single week, but it's very, very important. It's very important that I find a few different ways to express what I'm trying to say. Right, I think I've spoken for 20 minutes nearly, so I'm gonna play a video and hope that the laptop will allow me to do what I want to do. So it is live radio. Oh, I wanted to talk about WordPress a little bit as well, because there's a new version of WordPress software coming out this week, or in 2 or 3 days' time. They're at a point where they're on release candidate 2. I've got 4 WordPress websites at the moment. So I've got the radio show, which is Free Association radioshow.com. I've got ReikiMasterInitiation.com. I set up one a couple of weeks ago called CancerCureMastermindGroup.com. And I've also got ImaginationCreatesReality.live, .live, that one. So they're all WordPress groups. So I've been spending a little bit of time today just trying to keep plugins up to date, because there's going to be a core software update, and I need to be ready with everything prepped, so that I can track any issues if there's issues come up when I upgrade, when I hit the upgrade button. But WordPress is not known for its reliability particularly. They do all right, but I've had sites in the past that have collapsed when I upgraded. So I tend to be very, very cautious about core upgrades and about plugin upgrades. Plugin upgrades can be a nightmare with WordPress, because there's always some kind of conflict goes on somewhere when you upgrade a lot of plugins at once. So I tend to upgrade them in threes, and that way I've got at least got a limited amount of things to track. Might not be ideal, but doing them one at a time takes forever. Doing plugins, upgrading plugins in threes seems to be all right, because at least you've got a limited amount of things to track. So let me have a look and see where I can go with this. I was going to play something with Andrew Kaufman in it. Let me see what we've got. So Andrew Kaufman is a psychiatrist who's been talking about whether the virus is the cause of COVID-19 symptoms. So there's a few interviews that I could play. I don't know exactly what they're going to be, but his YouTube channel's got quite a few videos, so I'm just going to pick one. This is Live with Medical Dr. Andrew Kaufman. And hopefully there'll be enough volume that it'll pick up. At the moment, it doesn't seem to be happening. No, live anything is always a bit tricky. There's going to be technical issues somewhere. Now, I'll have to comment on a video by Brian Scott, who narrates Neville Goddard's lectures, and he's favorited the comment. It was just a comment about Imagination Creates Reality.live, and he seems to favorite everything. It's a comment by the looks of it, but so it's not really a significant thing, but at least he's read it. So that's a start. Let me see if I can get this video working. Doesn't seem to want to happen, so let's get rid of it. Try something else. I can see Lenny Time in the chat room, and I think Mona's in the chat room as well. The chat room is revolution.radio. The easiest way to get there is to go with a standalone Chatzy chat room link, which is at the top of the site. The other one seems to go around in circles with cookie issues. At least it did for me for the last couple of weeks. But the standalone Chatzy room seems to work. So that's that. We're listener supported on the radio station. There's 2 studios. So there's 2 studios running 24 hours a day at revolution.radio. Nobody takes any money from it. So if you can make a donation, if you're able to, then there's a Patreon button. You can make a donation monthly, or you can do a one-off donation. Or if you scroll further down the site, then there's a place to send a money order. As Lenny's in the chat room, I'm wondering if Lenny would come on and have a conversation about Imagination Creates Reality. I'll just give him a bit of time to respond in the chat. I'm not going to invite him in without him saying yes. And actually, I've forgotten how to do this on my mobile anyway, so it might be a bit more complicated than it looks. How on earth do I do this on a mobile? There we go. It's got to be that one, isn't it? Well, how do I add in? I don't know how to add people. I've forgotten how to do this on the mobile. It's so long since I did add people. There we go. Let's see if we can get Lenny in. Mona, I don't know whether you want to come in as well. I'm in the mood for just inviting people, so I'm gonna ring Lenny and see if he wants to come in. All right, okay. No worries, Lenny can't do it. That's fair enough, I suppose. Mona, if you're available, let me know in chat and I'll invite you in. Just for half an hour. Got half an hour left on the show. All right, here we go. Got plan B sorted out now. Let's I forgot what I'm doing again. Add people. Here we go. Add people. Anytime. Add.
Howdy, Dennis.
Hi, Lenny. How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay. Let me turn my radio off.
Yeah, no worries. It's all a bit improvised today because I've got technical issues on my laptop, so I'm on the mobile and just making it up as I go along.
Okay, so what did you want to talk about?
Imagination creates reality.
Well, my imagination has created quite a good reality. I am taking care of garden plants and totally away from most of the population of the world these days.
I think that's probably where I'm aiming to get to a cabin in the woods at some point, I think.
Yep, I do not have any Chinese karaoke singers anywhere around.
That was a surprise to me. When I moved to this flat, I wasn't expecting Chinese karaoke downstairs. I can assure you of that. So the next one, I need to make sure that I add in a caveat for no noisy neighbours.
I'm not sure that's possible unless you add the caveat for no neighbors.
That could be true. I don't know. Is it possible to filter out noisy neighbours with imaginative statements? I really don't know. I'm going to have to test it.
Now, what I found is that the way I work with imagination is if I dream up something and I write it up into my book, then it will manifest itself. But if I only think about it and I don't have it to where I've organized it in my own thoughts, it doesn't manifest in the actual way that I have pictured it.
Yeah, I tend to keep things quite vague and just let it roll and see what happens. But there's sometimes side effects, as I've found out with the neighbours here.
Yep. All you can do is all you can do. So you got to do the best you can with the cards you're dealt.
Yeah, I needed to get out of the previous place I was living, so anywhere would have been potentially better than where I was living.
When did you move to this place that you're in now?
November last year.
Okay.
So what I did was I had a mental block on working for the kitchen company that I'm working for now, because I've worked for them previously, and I had to get over that before I could get out of the place I was living. So I worked out a way to do that, then took the job. Then it took me about 6 months to actually get the move sorted out in my head. But when it happened within about a week. In all honesty, it happened really, really quickly. It was difficult. It's difficult to know what caused what, but I was being dropped off from work every night just around the corner from where I ended up living. So that was part of it. So it's reinforcing being in the area, I think is part of the process for me.
Yeah, it seems to me that once you've taken the steps of imagining something, it's much easier to fit in and have that become the reality. And there's some people who just manage to take everything off the cuff and whatever comes rolling at them they can deal with. But for me, I'd much rather be in my own little world of control and not have to deal with the outside situations. So right now, everything outside is a major situation, and I don't know how to read the tea leaves of life anymore. So I'm much more happy in my own reality than in the common shared reality as professed by the lamestream media.
Yeah, I'm kind of forced to deal with the shared reality because I'm working in it. In essence, we've got one-way systems set up at work, and we've got we've got a like distancing rules and stuff like that. We're being logged into work now with like an imaging system that takes a picture, like facial recognition software in the reception area, so you can't enter or leave the building without logging in on this facial recognition system, which is a bit weird to begin with, but you get used to it even after a while.
I guess if everybody else is doing it, it becomes real easy to join the mass and do it also. Um, I'm glad I don't live anywhere near an urban area because the density of the population sort of governs a lot of people's behavior. And I wonder if people don't act up because they are too tightly packed in human surroundings, that maybe it would be good to spread people out quite a bit more. But urban areas don't have that opportunity. They grow up rather than out. And so I don't know. How
Yeah,
many
I think
people are in the Newcastle area?
uh, it, Newcastle's about 300,000, and there's about 300,000 in Gateshead, which is next door. So the local area is about just over 500,000, and then just the region is about 1.5 million, 2 million, the northeast of England. So there is quite a lot of space. It has to be said. Gateshead's got a reasonable amount of green space in it. Newcastle's a bit more tightly contracted together, but there's plenty of space round about. We're on the end of Hadrian's Wall, if that means anything to you.
No, I've never been to Great Britain, so I have no concept of the geography.
Okay, that's fine. It's the wall to keep the Scots out. Is basically what it is. The Romans built a wall that goes coast to coast to keep the Scots out. It was the limit of the Roman Empire in Britain. And there's a natural river barrier anywhere. Newcastle's on the river, so there's a natural kind of river boundary there. Well, you think about it, the imagination that it takes to build the Roman Empire is huge. If we're talking about imagination creates reality, it's not just on a personal level, it's a social level as well, and the political level and economic level, all of those things.
Well, is it possible that the Roman Empire is not actually a historical reality and that it's just the imagination of people nowadays that made up a backstory that people had to buy? So that the Greeks, the Romans, even the Egyptians are maybe future realities, not past realities, but they've been sunk by the literature of the last century or two.
A lot of it is a lot of the ideas about the Roman Empire are projections of the British Empire, I think, because the Victorians thought that they were creating a new Troy or a new Rome or whatever. So I think a lot of it is to do with British expansion and the way they were thinking about building an empire. So they might have just been projecting themselves onto Rome.
Well, we went from New York, was formerly New Amsterdam, so something had happened in that time historically. But There's so much that goes on that I no longer know that I can believe what we were taught in our schooling system, in that it just seems like the world doesn't come from that place any longer.
I think, yeah, questioning history is a good way of opening up the future as well. It's like if once you've sown that seed of doubt, that history no longer restrains the future.
Well, if the theory that I'm working on holds, then all of the science fiction of the last century has really been seeding the next future, and in a couple of years, we'll be out in space. I know they're talking about missions to Mars and things like that, so maybe the following reality to this one, once it all breaks loose, is that we're going to be space traveling and everybody's going to wake up on the Starship Enterprise and have Scotty beaming them aboard places.
That's possible. I think that there tends to be about a 40-year lag between literature, movies, theatre in this case. There's about a 40-year lag between what can be done as theatre and how long it takes to actually manifest it. I think a lot of the artificial intelligence work that's being done at the moment is based on kids that were watching Star Trek that are now adults who are trained in artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I don't think that they could have developed artificial intelligence if it hadn't been presented as a reality in the fiction of the late 60s and 1970s. And now, I don't know, I read books about artificial intelligence controlling long distance travel, where they put people into cryogenic support and fly them over light years and then wake them up and they go about their normal lives. I don't know. The science fiction is definitely no longer contained by the planet Earth. I wonder how long the population will be.
It's tricky because but I don't know whether I want to buy into like a dystopian Soylent Green, Brave New World type future. So how am I going to use my imagination to not buy into that type of future?
Well, I don't know. The other type of future that we're being sold is the apocalyptic end of the earth, everybody starves and goes nuts future. And that seems more realistic given the on the ground happenings of what's currently going on. But we're not limited to an either or of space or Armageddon. There's a living Earth future, and there's many futures in the minds of individuals who just aren't talking outside because they don't have the audience. So I think we can make of it whatever we imagine.
I gravitate more towards the living Earth than either of the other two. But I spent so many years watching dystopian science fiction that I don't want that to be the reality that I buy into, particularly if I'm the one that's creating it.
Yeah, and I suppose that when we have thoughts that create that dystopia, the important thing is to negate them right away, to say, okay, now that I've thought about that, that's a possibility that won't happen because I've ruled it out.
Yeah, again, the editing process that I was talking about earlier on. So yeah, whatever thoughts come up, you don't necessarily need to reject them. You just don't attach to them.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're not actively rejecting anything. You're just not attaching to certain types of thought, and that way they can drop away naturally.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're living in a natural world right now. It just seems like the constructs that we're given are gradually becoming more and more unworkable. But as an individual, you can always walk in your own footsteps and you don't have to play the overall game. It seems like the two ones in Fibonacci are the individual self and the collective group as a whole. And as long as the collective group of a whole has a consensus reality, things seem to proceed well. But now that the consensus reality is broken and there's at least two and maybe 3 to 5 different consensus realities, at some part those timelines are going to diverge and we're going to get back into a reality more fitting for the individuals that are involved.
Yeah, I think it might actually end up being 7.8 billion individual realities that overlap. I don't think there's necessarily going to be one fixed viewpoint from now on. I think we've got much more personal awareness and much more personal freedom than we used to have. So we're much more capable of projecting imagination into the future or bringing ourselves into a new state of being. It's difficult to find the language for these things, but it's really about, it's not quite projecting into the future. It's as much bringing the future to now and then feeling it as real.
Do you think that each individual is actually a alive, real, sentient, independent thinking person? Or are there some people that are alive that are just protocol droids, where they are already programmed, they're going to think the way they think, and they're set up in the current reality just to keep that reality going and don't really have an independence like you or I?
I'm not sure, in all honesty, Lenny. I tend to give people credit for being capable of changing their own reality, but then I might just be projecting me onto everybody else when I'm doing that. I don't like the idea of hierarchies of people. That seems to not be, it doesn't sit well with me. So I'm not sure how to kind of balance that out. I give people credit, but maybe there are things in the way that are preventing them from having access to the skills they've actually got.
Yeah, it's hard to change belief into reality unless you're attempting to do it consciously like you are. And so when you can link an action that you've taken to a manifestation, it certainly does support your hypothesis. But do a lot of people think at all about what they're doing, or do they just do it as routine because that's what they've been taught and that's the way things are supposed to work?
And I struggled with this for years because I used to have what I perceived to be as uh, precognitive dreams. I used to have dreams that would then become what happened 2 or 3 days later. And what I thought was happening was that I was dreaming the future. And what was actually probably happening from my point of view now is that I was dreaming the future, but I wasn't doing it consciously. So it's like all my fears were being manifest in my dreams, and then they were playing out 2 or 3 days later.
Wow, that's scary because essentially you're taking the things you don't want, figuring out that they exist, and then manifesting them.
Yeah, that's the process I've been going through, and it's been a long process of just like manifesting fear after fear after fear, and in the end, you just run out of things to be frightened of.
Well, who was the person who said there's nothing to fear but fear itself?
Was that Eisenhower or somebody? It was one of your
Somebody,
presidents, I
I,
think.
I, I don't remember, but it's one of those pablums that they tell us that if we buy into and believe, whatever the belief that we have is, the reality of manifestation tends to go to belief. So I'm wary about what I believe. I used to believe the whole lock, stock, and barrel of what they taught us. Then my critical thinking came in, and I found too many things that fell apart in the wash. And so
Yeah.
now I like to be in my own isolation, watching what the world is going to do. And I don't know where they came up with the current reality that we have, but people, at least in the States, have bought into it so much that you see everybody running around with masks. And it used to be that masked people were not trusted. Nowadays, if you don't have a mask, you're not trusted. So they've sort of flipped everything upside down. Is that the idea that now our glass is turning and we're moving into a different dimensional reality?
Yeah, that's exactly what it seems like to me. It's like, but I know from my experience on a personal level that when I'm trying to shift out of a belief system, the easiest way to do that is to apply the opposite belief system. So I think that's what's happening on a mass scale. It's a manifestation of fear and paranoia. I don't think I don't know whether there's any real doubt about that. It was all the fear and anxiety that people are manifesting now has been sat inside of them, and it's the viruses and the math situation and the lockdown situation is all a manifestation of that fear, I think. So it could be that the whole situation is just a process of shadow integration. It's like it's bringing fear and anxiety to the surface so that it can be cleared or sorted out consciously. I don't know. I'm trying to put a good spin on something that may not have a good spin, but it's just more comfortable for me to look at it as a shadow integration process, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I guess if it's not working, we can always go back to our EFT and start tapping.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, I've got loads of different techniques that I can use to release fear anyway, but it's difficult to explain any of them to other people. So I really only have to concentrate on me because it takes too much time to explain what EFT is and what it does when it's like all I've really got at the moment is to overcome my own resistance to stuff. So that's what I've been working on over the last week. It's like an automatic process for me now that some kind of resistance comes up. I use Sedona method or EFT or Reiki or whatever to release it and move through it, and then the world opens up again. But it tightens up first before you can go through.
Yeah, I think that's part of creating our own reality is that it's a one person dimensional gate, and that once you've stepped through and created that reality and manifested it, you're not you're not back in the world with other people. Their impression has come into your world, and it'll take what you've driven it from. But if everybody is working on their own world and we're all in separate realities, the convergence of individual realities only happens when people get in touch with each other and interact. So for the time we're spending together on the show, it's partly your manifestation and partly my manifestation. Afterwards, we'll go our separate ways, but we won't be able to deny that we spent the last half hour discussing the idea of how what my individual thoughts are can govern the whole reality of humanity. And in fact, I don't think they can. I think that there's something going on greater than the individual that really drives the operating system, the consensus reality that we all have. But now that that consensus is falling apart, we need to go back to our books like The Fourth Turning by Strauss and Howe and look at how things changed in the past to to be able to see the mechanisms for the change in the future.
Yeah, I think seeing the mechanisms is an important point. Because if you know the formulas, if you know the way that events have played out, then they may or may not play out exactly the same way, but there's going to be a lot of similarities, which means that you can predict a certain amount. And I haven't quite worked out how the large scale consciousness interacts with my individual consciousness. I'm not sure how much of the what I perceive as the outside world is actually the outside world at the moment. So I've turned into a bit of a narcissist, but I'm working my way through it, trying to figure it out.
I think that reality rhymes with itself, but that it never repeats. That the situations that come up are the same situations, but the individual actors in those situations have freedom of choice to take a different route. And so in reality, it's almost like we're working from a script that's 2/3 written, and then it stops, and we're at that key juncture where we have to make decisions, and the rest of the reality goes on the decisions that we make that weren't written in the script.
Yeah, it's like you come to a nexus point, and then when you've made your choice, everything moves to a way of being that matches whatever choice you made. I don't know exactly how to describe that, but that seems to be how it works for me. It's like everything goes blurry and starts turning around in circles until it settles on the new direction.
Well, I know that when I have plans and I make an instantaneous change in plans, the things that happen seem to happen as though the plan that I originally had planned out was going to be the manifestation. But sometimes, like today, when I made the decision to take you up on the radio, once we're done with the show, I've got some things to do, and I will have less time to do them than I would have had I started the process at 8:30. On the other hand, I will be done at the same time I would have been done no matter when I started. And so, in essence, what I have done is I have changed the composition of that reality to edit the time for different purposes so that we could have this discussion.
Yeah, I think the editing process metaphor is a good one. That's the one that I'm sticking with for the time being because it puts me in control. It puts me in the driving seat in a way that other metaphors haven't done. So I've now got an ability to direct and produce and edit my own reality, for want of a better phrase. I mean, so this is all theatre or movie metaphors, but it works
Not
as
only
a
that, but
metaphor.
you're also the star of your own show.
Yeah, exactly. So I get to interact with the audience and get the flowers at the end of the performance and all of that.
I figure that we're all part of each other's supporting cast, and that if we can take on the role of supporting cast at times and lead actor at other times, then we are more functional in the live action role play, the LARP that we're now seeing happen. But maybe if there's 7.8 billion people, maybe there's 7.8 million different LARPs that are taking place, and we all fit into one of those that has already been predestined to happen because all the situations that people might face get faced during the time that we are really in those situations.
Yeah, I've always thought of myself as a supporting like a supporting character actor, but every now and again I end up being the on the hero's journey, doing that thing. So sometimes I'm supporting other people on a hero's journey, and other times they're supporting me. But ultimately it's the same journey, I think.
Well, I'm pleased to be a member of your cast of characters. Thanks for having me on this morning.
No worries. Lenny, tell people where they can find you online, just because we're starting to come to the end of the show?
I am on minds.com. You can find me as the Mad Dr. Time.
Excellent. I do try and keep up with your blog a little bit. I've lost a little bit of my ability to have a lot of internet time because I'm working different shifts again now. They've changed my shifts, so I've got less ability to do what I wanted to do. But at the same time, I'm getting more interaction at work and having good conversations at work. So it balances out in the end. So thanks for being here, Lenny. I'll let you get on with your tasks for the day.
Okay.
We'll maybe meet up again in a month or so.
At some point, you're always welcome to check if I'm in the chat room and call on to me if I'm there.
All right, cool. I will do that. Just a reminder, Revolution Radio is listener supported. So if you do have any spare change and you want to contribute to the station, nobody takes any fees or wages or anything. And there's 2 servers to run. So if you can, then throw some cash at revolution.radio. There's a Patreon button there. And if you can give monthly, that will help to keep the servers running. You can find me in about 4 different places at the moment. So freeassociationradioshow.com is the website for this particular show. I've got cancercuremastermindgroup.com. I've got reikimasterinitiation.com. And I've also got imaginationcreatesreality.live. So I'm spread a bit thin at the moment, but everything will come together in the end. It's just a matter of figuring out what order everything has to happen in. And then imagining enough visitors to pay the bills with a website. But that's where you can find me. It's been a pleasure, Lenny, as always. We're coming to the end of the show now, so I'm going to sign off and let the music take its way to the top of the hour. I think we're probably due for music about now.